Don't get me wrong, being woke can definitely be a problem for a game, especially when the game is a narratively focused one. But I do think the issue is far deeper than just games are too woke, DEI, far left, or whatever you want to call it. Every time I've seen a game that is considered to be woke, it usually has worse issues than the fact that the game is spouting off far left political nonsense. Those games usually just fail as games, and it just feels like the people who put in the far left political messaging did it so they could garner more attention on the messaging itself to distract from the fact that the game is a failure of a game in every aspect. Instead of facing the reality that the game just sucked, they used the unpopular messaging as a shield to explain why the game was poorly received by fans to corporate and anybody else in their circles like game journalists. The real problem that is infecting AAA games with things like woke messaging is corporate culture. And of course, all my talking points in this video are from the perspective of an outsider. So even though I'm always right, never wrong like every other YouTuber, I can miss a point or just not know something. So with that said, let's talk about the corporate culture I see with most AAA studios. From the outside looking in, it seems like most AAA studios have become a black hole where nothing gets done, and inefficiency seems to be the theme for why the games they make end up being hot garbage. Halo Infinite, for example, released without a dedicated Slayer playlist, and when a 343 employee was asked about it a bunch, they said they were discussing the feasibility of Slayer, which is crazy to even need to have a discussion on, for a FPS multiplayer game that has always included a dedicated Slayer playlist at launch for all its titles before Infinite. I could use Halo Infinite and 343 for a variety of examples, but all you really need to show for evidence of inefficient corporate culture is to pay any sort of attention to companies like EA, Ubisoft, Microsoft, Sony, Bungie, or just any AAA big budget company to see that we, the consumers, are getting a worse product despite the fact that the games have bigger budgets and usually take longer to make than they used to. You see a lot of YouTubers and normal people talk about wokeness in games all the time. And again, I do agree it's an issue. But usually what they talk about, I feel doesn't really hit the core issue, which is the inefficiency of the workplace that these game studios foster and why they've become like that. I believe the reason these studios are inefficient now is because of the politics and bureaucracy. The people in charge stopped caring about the important stuff, like making a fun video game, and instead they are more interested in how to make as much money as possible while looking like they care about minorities. They hire activists to make these games now because it will look like they care about the black community, Asian community, women, and whatever else the woke crowd likes these days. But make no mistake, these companies do not care, and as soon as they start to lose money, they will either go bankrupt or fire the activists, since it will be costing them the bottom line. A good example is when every company except the branches in the Middle East celebrates Gay Pride Month. You know they only do it to make sales and to look morally good. But they actually don't care about gay people at all. In fact, as soon as July 1st hits, they dump that rainbow logo faster than a homeless man spends his begging change on drugs. The next point I want to discuss, and that kind of goes with the corporate culture of inefficiency, is the fact that the rot starts at the top positions. In the top positions, you're seeing where a lot of the activists are. And when the rot starts at the top, it goes to middle management, and then finally it goes to the bottom levels. You can't have efficient work when the top managers and middle managers don't make an efficient workspace for the normal workers or the grunts to do their job properly. And again, I'm an outsider, but from what I hear, a lot of these companies, with how big they are and how bloated they are with management, they're starting to become like the United States government and how no one takes responsibility for anything, no one wants to take responsibility for anything, and nothing ever gets done. You could say what I'm saying is hearsay, which is fine, but I like to look at the finished product, like Halo Infinite for example, and realize it had the worst netcode, it had the least amount of playlists ever, and it took a year for Forge to come, which was really awful for the game. And again, I'm an outsider, and I've kind of formed this opinion because I've watched some of Tim Kane's videos on working in these companies, and I've seen interviews from former Bethesda Game Studio developers. And of course, I've also followed developers for 343 since I'm a big fan of Halo. And it just seems like these companies, AAA specifically, are becoming a lot like the United States government with how bureaucratic, how inefficient they are. And of course, the products we're getting as a result are becoming worse and worse. Halo Infinite at launch had less stuff in it than Halo CE did with its multiplayer. And its multiplayer wasn't even online, it was all LAN parties. Let me know in the comments, am I right about the core issue with games today? Or am I wrong and it's really about wokeness, or just something else? Thank you for watching the video, and
I'm sorry, sir. It's time for you to leave.